What's up, Janky fam, and welcome to Update 2 from our Pontiac G8 GT Build. For those not familiar, I drove to the middle of nowhere, West Virginia to buy this car. I have some modest plans for it outside of what it's already got. The biggest thing right now is a manual swap. Last night, with the promise of free beer and potato chips, I convinced a couple of my friends to come over. Shout out to Kevin and Chris. Honestly, I wouldn't be anywhere near as far as I am on this car right now without them. But they came over, spent about 5 hours over here pulling that guy behind me. What we've got here is a high stall torque converter, which drives like absolute garbage on the street. And we have I think a 6L80, something like that, transmission, which is gonna go bye-bye. I salute you, sir, and I'll see ya. But this was actually my first time getting under this car, and I discovered some things. Number one, that it has an oil leak, which kind of sucks. I'm thinking either oil pan or rear main seal. Number two is that the long tube headers and catback, I thought was like some custom crappy knockoff. Actually discovered is an American racing kit. So the previous owner did put some pretty nice parts on this car. These guys right here, I was hoping that this was gonna be catted, but as it turns out, it is definitely not. Get my flashlight for you. Empty. You might have seen it, but lurking in the corner over here is our TR6060.
It took absolutely forever to find one of these, mostly because people don't want to separate their engine and their trans when they're selling. But I did eventually find one on Facebook Marketplace.
Tucked in way behind that is a Camaro rear differential. It's a 345, and that's going to better match the gear ratio on the TR6060. Walking over here to our exhaust. Here's part of the exhaust that I'm not happy about. I think cutoffs are absolutely cheesy as hell. Previous owner installed them. They were wired into the cigarette lighter of all things, but I'm going to remove these. I think I'm going to try to just put a block off plate or something like that for now. So the drive shaft, which as part of this swap, you theoretically either replace with an aluminum piece or you have to get this shortened like 1.5 inches or something along those lines if you're using a Camaro transmission. But in driving the car around, I kind of felt like there was some vibration as in pulling the drive shaft. Here's the carrier bearing, which as you can see is not really much of a carrier bearing at all at this point. But yeah, here's where she sits. I don't want to say it's halfway there. I mean, because while the transmission's out, there's still a long, long way to go, but we're much further along than we were yesterday.
So we got a bunch going on in here right now. I had to pull the oil pan because the gasket was leaking. When I did that,
we found these things in the pan. These things are the pins from the factory rocker arm trunnion bearings. And then this right here is evidently from the original tensioner on the car.
You know, so finding metal stuff in your oil pan, not great. Not a great feeling. I very much had a panic attack, but it seems like with the Gen 4 engines, maybe the rocker arm pins aren't that big a deal, and maybe there wasn't any sort of significant damage done to the engine itself. This car has a cam on it. They removed whatever cylinder deactivation and all that, but they bought basically a whole cam install kit, and that often includes the tensioner for this engine. So my thought is that it's probably been replaced, and I'm probably going to waste my time pulling the front cover. But it does feel like something I need to do at this point, unfortunately. So this thing right here is a timing chain tensioner, and it should not be in the oil pan. The thing is, they break frequently, and they wind up in the oil pan, so the question became whether or not someone had replaced this and just left it in the oil pan, whatever. And that's where Mr. Borescope comes in.
Lighting obviously sucks in here, but I'm going to fish this guy in through the oil pan opening to see if the tensioner has been replaced. Now, truth be told, I've already done this, and I've confirmed that the tensioner has been replaced. But yeah, just a really cool tool that for about $100 saved me, let's say like 2 hours, and having to pull off the crank pulley and the front cover just to make sure the tensioner had been replaced. Oil pan is cleaned out. Need to bolt the little baffle back in. I did go ahead and rivet the gasket back in, which is how these come from the factory. Figure since I'm jamming this back into some tight spaces under the car, it probably makes sense to keep the gasket riveted just to make sure it doesn't move around. Because I really don't want to take this thing back off. All right, so probably one of the more daunting things when doing this swap is the clutch pedal. And what's daunting about this is that you have to drill holes into the firewall of your car, and you only get one shot at it. All right, so this is the clutch pedal out of a 2010 Chevy Camaro. It is evidently a direct fit to the G8, but with the studs on the back of the pedal, I, for the life of me, cannot figure out how to get this thing to line up. And I really do not want to mess this up. Okay, so after trying to get this to line up for a good 40 minutes, I decided that with these studs on the back, there was no way I was going to get the alignment I wanted, and I am way too anal to wing it. So what I decided to do is drill the studs out of the back of the pedal. It was a real pain in the ass, but it's gonna allow me to get like the perfect alignment on this pedal and meet my very nitpicky personal expectations. Okay, so this is the view of the firewall. You can see I drilled the top hole already, and then I marked the bottom. And then while I had the pedal in last time, I traced out that little center pattern on the pedal, which is where the clutch master goes through. So I'm probably gonna hit that with a hole saw and then a series of, let's call them Dremel accessories. Wish me luck. Well, I don't remember when I bought those hole saw bits, but evidently they are not up to task because it seems to have gotten stuck about halfway through the firewall. All right, so given my hole saw woes, I went ahead and picked up these, I think they're carbide tips for the Dremel. These have been doing a pretty good job of chewing through the firewall. I'm trying to get a little camera angle. I bought this thing, I don't know, at least a decade ago, and this has been by far the most durable and useful tool in my workbench. I use it for literally everything. I think that's about it. I'm gonna hit it with a sanding drum just to kind of smooth that out a little bit, but otherwise, seems like it came out pretty good. This is vaguely what the hole for the clutch pedal should look like when you're done with it.
Now in automatic cars, you may or may not have noticed, they have a much wider brake pedal because there's no clutch pedal on the other side. So when I install the clutch pedal in this car, the big brake pedal is gonna be in the way. I covered said clutch pedal in blue painter's tape, with the idea being that I'm going to use this as a template to trim down the brake pedal. So now, we have a template to cut that. Mission accomplished for the clutch. Now I need to trim down the brake pedal. And again, one shot, hopefully you don't fuck it up. And hopefully I got the right spacing in between the pedals, which I guess we're gonna find out. I measured it out the other day, and it seems like if I cut it basically directly on the edge, using that template that I made out of blue painter's tape, that I should have basically perfect spacing between the pedals. So now just, I guess, a steady hand in getting this cut and shaped. That's gonna need a little shaping up with a more abrasive wheel as opposed to a cutting wheel, but that's your basic shape, I guess. I do believe that'll do. Now we just gotta try to fit this thing on there. Look at us being all fancy with 3 pedals. I gotta tell you, it's been a lazy ass winter for me. It has been freezing here, and I have not felt like getting out in this garage at all. But it is getting warmer, and I got a renewed enthusiasm to get this thing back on the road before the warm weather starts so I can actually drive it this year. So they're dirty. But this right here is my first official mod to the Pontiac. These are VMR, I believe V10 wheels. These are the Flow Forge version. But I got a custom finish done in satin black. I'm going the black on black. I know that's not exactly cool these days, but it's my aesthetic and I'm sticking with it. So I think from the factory, these come with like a 245 4019, something like that. I bumped them up to a 265 3519, and that is squared all 4 corners. I know a lot of folks with high-powered rear-wheel drive cars, they do a stagger and put bigger tires out in the back. But I am wanting to do like autocross and maybe some track day type things. So I figured my first set of tires in this car at least would be a squared setup, and then if I don't like it, I could always change it down the line. I mean, these things are probably not going to last that long anyway, if we're honest. All right, so I did the rear main seal, obviously the new pilot bearing, and did the whole rear cover gasket. Mr. Transmission sitting in the corner over here. Clutch pedal and the fluid reservoir are the next 2 things going to go in. I also need to throw the pressure plate in. You might notice that there is already a clutch pedal in the car. So actually on the pedal that's in the car, I cut these off and I drilled them out. And that enabled me to sit this flat against the firewall and get a good pedal position. So I thought to myself, I'll just put a bolt through here and put a nut on the other side in the firewall. But there's no way to tighten that alone. And the space in there is so tight that it was basically impossible. So I happened to get this guy free with the trans, so I decided just to swap them out. Our fun pedal is fully in. I just need to install the clutch master cylinder real quick, which real quick is never real quick when you work on cars. Fun fact, here's your clutch pedal. Above your clutch pedal, sitting right about here, is this clip, and this clip is your factory wiring for the clutch pedal sensor. And that's this sensor up here that determines whether or not your clutch pedal is depressed to start the car and all that. And theoretically, this will mean that I don't have to run any wires. This is already pre-run to the ECU. Thanks, Pontiac. Or I guess more accurately, Holden. I was able to find a part number for the pigtail and basically just pinned that in. And the clutch position sensor is good. So the pedals are officially done. And now I just got to work on the reservoir. So with the manual swap, I think on the Camaro and the manual G8s, the clutch fluid reservoir is actually built into the brake fluid. So this right here is the reservoir for my clutch fluid. Tick Performance sells this kit, but it is meant for the manual Camaro G8, so it doesn't quite fit the reservoir on this car. And when you try to use this little flat bracket they gave you, which I already bent up a little bit to see if I can get it to work, the reservoir hits against parts of the car and just doesn't fit. So I have my torch and my hammer and a long piece of aluminum here, and I'm going to try to fab up a little piece that will allow me to bolt this thing to the brake fluid reservoir as intended. I don't know why my default is always 3D printing, but I 3D printed a little bracket setup for me to match up. I'm using this to heat up the metal so the aluminum doesn't crack as I'm bending it. Hey, not bad, not bad. I think that'll work. And here is the second part I need to make to complete that bracket. There you go. I made the metal one just a little bit taller to give the reservoir some more room. A quick little update so you can see how everything's laying out. This is my one bracket, and it attaches to the screw on the brake fluid reservoir. So the bracket that comes with this thing is basically just one long piece like this, but it moves. Even when it's screwed in, it moves. So that's why I'm planning on using this thing to basically shore it up on the other side. Like the one could work and it would probably run on this car for 100,000 miles, but it feels unfinished to me. So I can't let that stand. We're gonna fix it. Well, here's what I came up with. Is it pretty? No. Will it work? Yeah, it works great. Basically, there's two holes on the master that hold the tank on, and it just uses those two holes to support itself. All right, here's your finished product. Got it all painted up nice so it doesn't look like an eyesore on the engine bay, and nice and secure. So as far as the project goes, the clutch pedal obviously done. The pressure plate is installed. Let's try not to f the camera up. Whee! But yeah, so that's all set for the trans install. I did some of the base prep for the shifter. I had to replace the gasket on the oil pan, and thus far, no more drippy drips, so I think we're good there. And I think the trans is basically ready to go on. Still have the wiring to do. This is the connector for the trans. Because the TR6060 has some solenoids and whatnot on it, I do have to run wires basically to the ECU to account for all that. I'll tell you, I don't know how YouTubers and other folks do under car shots, because even with the quick jacks, it is very tight under there and sucks to work with the camera, especially when you have like a decent camera that you're trying to keep in okay condition. That was a bad idea. So we got a lot done on this one. Obviously still a lot more to go. The biggest things being the wiring harness, the drive shaft, actually getting the transmission up into the car, no big deal. Also need to swap out the differential. This is my starting point right here, which is a manual transmission section pulled out of a 5th gen Camaro harness. Basically, I need to pin this into mine, which includes running some of these wires to the ECU and such. This is the shifter that's going to be going in the car. Evidently, the arms for this also need to be shortened because the Camaro transmission is longer than the one that came in the G8. Kind of a similar note for the drive shaft, where I either need to get this one shortened or I need to replace it with an aluminum one. And then the differential and the transmission, which obviously both need to be put in. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, whether it was helpful, entertaining, or both. And hopefully, I'll see you next time. Thanks again for watching. Please consider commenting, liking, and subscribing, as that helps the channel probably more than you realize. If you want to help the channel more directly, maybe consider buying one of these super cool vinyls from the Janky shop. Otherwise, I guess, just watch some more videos.